Back to Victoria now, where after 4 years of soaring house prices in Melbourne, there are now some positive signs for buyers. A drop in prices of 5.4% brings some affordability back to the market. But it's still nowhere near enough for thousands of Victorians who are struggling to keep a roof over their head, as Anna McDonald reports.
To buy or not to buy?
What's it worth? $7.85. Great opportunity.
It's the question on every potential buyer's lips as Melbourne house prices take a long-awaited tumble.
1.325. Sold.
If you know what you want, now's the time to go look.
Just go for it if you can see an opportunity, really.
Since 2007, property values in Melbourne have soared by a massive 44%. But with new figures showing a drop in house prices of 5.4% for the year to October, many are now a little closer to owning their own home.
Going and sold.
It's not a silver bullet, it's not going to be a long-term fix, but it will help in the immediate term with affordability.
Anybody who's looking to buy a home in Melbourne would certainly appreciate the return of at least some level of affordability to the marketplace.
RP Data's Tim Lawless says the market is levelling out and is likely to do so for some months.
We're seeing lower interest rates, lower home values. We've seen household incomes rise by around 8% or so over the past year. So those factors combined are certainly improving the affordability situation.
First home buyers and anyone who's been looking to buy a home or move should look at the current market and realise that some opportunities are out there.
Yeah, cool.
But few are seizing the opportunities. Melbourne clearance rates have been consistently low this year, with just over half of the 960 properties up for auction last weekend selling.
Australians are very economically literate and they read and see what's going on in America and in Europe and they worry.
The price falls come on the back of a report by The Economist, which startled many. It declared Australian property values to be overvalued by 25%, more than homes in America at the peak of its housing bubble. Tax reform lobbyist David Collier agrees.
Land in Australia is now worth about $4 trillion. It ought to be worth about just over $2 trillion. And I expect the price of land to halve over about the next 4 or 5 years.
I certainly don't subscribe to that view. To date, we haven't seen any evidence that Australian home values would fall by that level of magnitude. In fact, we are seeing a lot of indicators that are now suggesting the housing market is levelling.
While the levelling of the market may boost the confidence of potential buyers, for thousands of Victorians, owning a home is still a long way off, even if you have a full-time job.
I'm lucky if I can afford to rent, let alone save up to get into, to try and buy something. I couldn't even save up the deposit. If I could get the deposit, I wouldn't be able to pay the bank fees.
Sarah Smith is a social worker and has been renting for 20 years. For each of those years, her rent has increased, but her modest income hasn't.
I don't know whether the government needs to make more affordable housing available so there's not such a strain on the private rental market, but something needs to be done.
We're looking at Mildura up here.
730 Victoria has new data that shows the extent of housing stress in the state.
So what's happening in Mildura is that mismatch between wages and housing costs as well. It's almost $700 a week.
Sarah Toohey of Australians for Affordable Housing looked at people on the lowest 40% of incomes who are paying more than a third of their wage on housing costs. The local government area of Greater Dandenong topped the Melbourne list with around 20% of people struggling to pay either their rent or mortgage. Hume, Melbourne and Brimbank followed. For the state, Mildura is experiencing the most pressure with 18%, before Mount Alexander, the Central Goldfields and Bendigo.
Governments haven't addressed this problem. We've seen going on for too long, 10 years of huge house price increases and very little action. We've actually got less public and community housing now than we did back in 2001.
Even the real estate agents agree.
Australians deserve a roof over their head. I don't think anyone could argue with that. And so it is not our preferred situation to see property as unaffordable as it reached in 2010, and governments have to work together to stop that from happening in the future.
Affordability is the greatest challenge of my generation in politics. Housing affordability and the fact that a generation of Victorians may be locked out of the home ownership market is an enormous priority and enormous concern.
The Planning Minister says the government's been focused on supply, introducing 50,000 new lots into Melbourne's growth areas. One example is Fisherman's Bend near the Westgate Bridge. 200 hectares of land will be redeveloped there to house tens of thousands of people.
When you look at developments like Fisherman's Bend, we really need governments to say we're going to make sure that at least 20% of this development is either social housing, affordable rental housing, or is in a dedicated affordable purchase program as well.
We haven't worked on percentages. We do know that there will certainly be affordable homes in that market, and there'll be certainly stock that will cater for people who need that kind of housing on the edge of the CBD.
So, while the government continues to face what it says is the biggest challenge of its time, the slight cooling of house prices will at least provide some relief for those wanting a share of Melbourne's ever-changing property market.
I think a lot of buyers will potentially be holding out to see if prices fall further, but I think time will tell, and affordability both in the housing market and the rental market is certainly an issue, and with rents going up as well, first home buyers and renters are certainly between a rock and a hard place.